Microphone's not on. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Environment Select Committee meeting. I'll remind members and officers that this meeting is being broadcast live to the public on the internet and recorded for view on the Council's YouTube channel. For the benefit of those watching online, I'm Nick Murray, the chair of the committee. I'd point out to members that there is another Select Committee meeting directly after this meeting. We therefore need to keep to time in order to vacate the room at the latest by 1:30. So item 1 on the agenda is apologies and substitutions. So Simon, do we have any apologies?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Martin Dents, who's being substituted by Councillor Unja Palman, and from Councillor Augusta Urquhart-Nichols, who's being substituted by Councillor Kevin Asplin. I'd also like to draw attention to members that at the last full council on the 21st of October, there were the following membership changes, and Councillor Kim Marie Cleesby is now a substitute for the committee.
Thank you, Simon. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes of the Environment Select Committee meeting held on the 9th of September have yet to be finalised and will need to be approved and signed at the next Environment Select Committee. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of disclosable interest or dispensations granted by the Standards Committee in relation to this meeting? I can't see any. Thank you very much. So I'll move on to item 4, Chairman's announcements. I have a couple of announcements. You may be aware that the restrictions have been placed upon access to certain reports for members following a leak of confidential information. This has caused some difficulties, including for our Waste Transformation Task Group. However, I can announce that the restrictions are now being lifted. The monitoring officer will write to all members asking them to confirm by reply that they have respected the confidential information. Members will then have access to Part 2 digital information reinstated. We'll return to this topic at item 8 in terms of our update on the Waste Transformation Group. With reference to item 8, the task group updates, Councillor Wright needs to leave the meeting early, so I would like to reorder the agenda and take item 8 after item 6. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah, thank you very much. Also, 2 motions from full council relevant to our remit, referred to scrutiny on the 21st of October, will be, at least initially, considered by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Management Committee in its next meeting, which is in line with the Constitution Part 8, paragraph 6.16 to 6.17. Thank you. That's all the announcements. So item 5 is public participation. The committee has received questions from Councillor White, which have been published as a supplement, which you have received. And I would now ask Councillor White if he has any supplementary questions in respect to that reply.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
We need to have a microphone, sorry. Yeah.
It's a temptation to start singing. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the written response. I would like just to follow up, because it's a very important issue for many residents in rural communities around Wiltshire. And I want to refer to the word guidance and DFT, because I think the DFT offers greater flexibility in applying speed limits for local authorities than sometimes we experience. So I'd just like to pick out a couple of examples, and I hope that the new speed assessment takes into account things like that we don't have to use, as far as DFT says, the 85% percentile measurement. There is an option to use a mean speed average. I've not seen that in any of the studies we've had so far. Also, emphasis on quality of life, and specifically mentioning for villages like the ones I represent, the fear of traffic is actually a very significant factor. So just overall, I hope that this new speed assessment, when we see it, will take into account and give greater weight to local residents like mine who are not complete idiots. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor White. I don't know if the officer, if Dave Bullock wanted to respond to that, or we don't have to. There's no direct question.
I think thank you actually for pointing those out. As you're aware, we are undertaking a review in terms of how we then set speed limits and weaving those principles within that speed limit review policy. I think it really, really is important that we listen to our communities in how we set speed limits, making sure that we're just not applying the rules rigidly and we are understanding. So that philosophy will come forward as that policy develops.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Okay, moving on now to agenda item 8 in different order from the agenda you've got. So are we doing 6 first? I beg your pardon. So we'll go to 6. Let's whiz back up, which is street scenes and ground maintenance contract update. I thought we were doing 8 before. We're doing 6 before, that's fine. So I will... the report is on page 21 to 32 of your agenda pack. The Cabinet Member, Councillor Martin Smith, for highways and streets and flooding, will introduce the report. Over to you, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the street scene and ground maintenance contract update. I think it's a very positive report. The contract with ID Verdi covers a whole wide range of services, as you can see in the report. The contract also includes incentives to the supplier to improve efficiency in the delivery of those services. And the KPIs in the contract are reporting good to high performance, and the measures can be seen against those at Appendix B. The performance outcome for 24-25 year resulted in a 9-month extension contract, and that's explained in Appendix A in some detail. These extensions are conditional on the continuation of acceptable performance, so it's not just sort of a blank check to the supplier. And you'll find more details on the budget savings that the supplier has brought forward in Appendix C. The street scene policy commitments are also in Appendix E, and a list of what was actually delivered in the previous financial year is in Appendix F. So all the detail is there for members to see. I understand that Adrian Hampton's got a couple of slides he may wish to show just to help members with all that.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, just very quickly, just pull out a couple of those things. Just to explain the contract. The contract itself passes all the risk, or the majority of the risk, to the contractor, and that's why it's called a pay and gain contract. So what happens within there, the contractor at the time of tender actually sets the targets to actually hit, and if they do not meet those targets, there are financial penalties applied. So when we talk about efficiency savings, that's those financial penalties that are applied. So there is a penalty for cost, and then there's an incentive, as Councillor was explaining, with regards to the extension periods for good performance. With regards to where they are, just a couple of points actually to highlight. This year there was almost £1 million worth of savings. That was partly the service delegation in Trowbridge and Westbury, but also an additional £170,000 worth of efficiency savings. The contractor has moved their fuel to hydrated vegetable oil and their small tools to electric, which has seen a reduction in carbon from 220 down to about 20 tonnes of carbon. There's 90% saving actually with HVO, and we continue to see, as Councillor was saying, with regards to good performance. Just a breakdown there of the costs and savings. So in essence, the baseline budget is 5 mil, and there were some additional funding this year for EMR with cleansing and with regards to transfer of rural play areas. So all that has been completed. The play areas, we are now just finally finishing off the transfer to those town and parish councils. All that's completed, and then you can see the recurring savings there going forward of £700,000 of recurring savings, and the 1.7 mil worth of efficiency savings this year with regards to the targets that they set, that we then obviously take money off them if they do not achieve that. So that itself drives performance. Just to highlight there, it's a very complex way of scoring with regards to their performance, and just a couple of highlights of their social value, because within the contract itself, whilst it is delivered by ID Verdi, the social value is an element of the contract. So whether that is obviously working with youth, employing certain groups, or obviously they're the Best Kept Village sponsorship. And there's the KPIs, which I'll just go on to quickly there. They undertook this year around about 180 community events. that would, yes, sponsoring the Best Kept Village, or that would be the schools events that you've seen. They're individual events, so there were far more activities undertaken than was put there, and that's the POG data, so we've got high performance. And then just to give you some of the idea of the numbers, you've got 200,000 collections of litter bins, you know, over 1,500 litter fly tips removed. You can see obviously the extent of town centres cleaned, and then grass cutting. And then what we have been doing as well with Ida Verde is moving our grounds maintenance to more biodiversity outcomes. So that is the increase in biodiversity managed land up to almost 400,000 square metres actually of grass. So just to wrap up what was actually said there, we've got strong performance. So they had that 9 months extension because of the performance this year. They've exceeded their environmental and their community promises. The government remains strong, and obviously we continue to strive for those efficiencies, and hopefully be delivering more in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian. So over to members then for questions. Who'd like to ask the first question? So Councillor Holder first.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I have some specific questions relating to what the information you've put in Appendix E, if I may, Adrian. So you talk about the wildflower conservation areas and the frequency of the cut there. These wildflower conservation areas have been in place now for a couple of years. But if I'm being completely blunt, I've seen little evidence of any flowers actually growing. And I get many comments from my residents saying, when are we actually going to see anything coming through here? I appreciate that we're trying to encourage native fauna and flora, but there is a school of thought, albeit not one that I subscribe to, is this is actually just a way of cutting less grass and just making it just become untidy. And I think my first question is, when are we going to see evidence that actually some of these wildflowers are growing? And secondly, what can we do to communicate better with our residents as to what we're trying to achieve here, so they can actually understand what the outcome's going to be? So that's my first question. I have two others, Chair, if I may.
I think we'll take one at a time. So do you want to go for that, Adrian? Then you can carry on.
Very valid points. With regards to wildflower, it can take many, many, many years, obviously, for wildflowers to establish themselves. However, we undertook a trial, and sorry, apologies, it was not in the report, where we commissioned a wildflower group to do a survey on 7 of the wildflower groups and the wildflower areas. Those areas we have run trials where we've actually been planting and seeding those areas to actually monitor the outcome of that. And next year when I come back, I'm happy to do obviously a feedback actually from those trials. So yeah, we've moved from because what happens is it is recognised that different types of mowing should encourage different types of wildflower. Wildflower themselves is cut twice a year to allow the flowering season, but also with regards to removing the nitrates, removing obviously the cut grass to allow the nitrates, obviously to allow that type of flower to grow. Sorry. So that is what the 2 times a year cut is. We actually have removed some mowing altogether because that encourages the natural fauna and flora to actually grow. But we have now put these 6 trial areas in where we've actually been seeding and planting just to see whether that is something that's worth exploring and bringing back to members at a future date in recognition of that particular issue with it, getting the wildflowers to establish themselves.
Okay, so I'm aware, thank you. I'm aware, just a follow up for my other, I'm aware of the trials. When are we expecting actually to see the seeds and the plugs that were planted actually come to fruition? Because so far we've seen nothing through this summer as far as I'm aware.
And that's correct. So we got the next review will actually be next year. And that, so that for the next time we do the report, this report, I can bring back actually the evidence to that. But you were right, it hasn't seen a considerable amount of flower growth in those areas. So we will come back and we will obviously explain the value to that and whether obviously it's worth expanding or not.
Thank you. And I wanted, if I may, Chair, talk about litter bins. I'm aware that when Ida Verde empty the Wiltshire Council-owned litter bins, and I appreciate in many parishes there is there are bins that are owned by by us, and bins that are owned by parishes. So there is obviously some confusion out there with our residents in terms of who does what. But let's focus on the Wiltshire Council emptied litter bins. I know that there was some work done whereby ID Verdi were tasked to take photographs of the bins and actually do some sort of evaluation of how full the bins that we are emptying get, with an opportunity possibly to increase frequency of some that are filled more regularly than others, and decrease those where they're not filled as much. Are you able to give us an update as to what that has delivered, and generally whether we have made significant changes to the frequency of bins emptied by ID Verdi on our behalf?
You're right to point out the difference. So in town centres, the answer would be the frequency in essence has remained the same. They visit twice a day and they will make sure those litter bins are actually emptied for the following day. So the vast majority of our litter bins are in the town centre, but the rural litter bins, we continue to review those. We do remove those litter bins, so where they're not used, or actually we will use the data as well when we're assessing when litter bins become damaged. If there's a close by litter bin, so you've got 2 litter bins that are at the moment in time being emptied to a frequency to allow that waste to be placed in one litter bin. So that does see some reduction. But off the top of my head, I haven't got the figures, but we continue to reduce the number of litter bins out there based upon the data, and also to reduce the frequency. Again, next year, I can actually bring back the frequency empty and the number of litter bins to this and contain that in the report.
Okay, so thank you for that. So when the decision is made to remove a Wiltshire Council-owned litter bin, how do we communicate that to our residents? How do we communicate that to our elected members? Because there is a general concern out there that the amount of litter, certainly in our rural communities, is increasing rather than decreasing. So that would be, to me, to be counterintuitive that we're taking bins away when I'm told on a regular basis by my residents there aren't enough litter bins. And I want to come on to a supplementary question about increasing litter bins.
I wish litter bins worked. I truly wish litter bins worked. We send resources every single day to town centres and you will fall over litter bins in the town centres. I wish they worked. They would be the most cost-effective way of collecting litter. Sadly, all the trials that we have run, where we've actually increased litter bins, particularly on rural roads and main roads, we ran a trial around Chippenham a couple of years ago where we put in big litter bins, it sadly increased the litter. So litter bins are excellent for people who are responsible. They will see a litter bin, they will pick it up and they will put their rubbish actually into a litter bin and they act responsibly. Where, sadly, an example will be the town centres, having litter bins does not stop litter. So when we actually, that's the background to litter bins, I wish they worked. With regards to when we remove a litter bin, we always speak to the town or parish council. To be honest, it's about giving them the option if they wish to fund their own and provide their own provision because there isn't a proven need. If there's a proven need, we will replace that litter bin. If the data says that that litter bin should be replaced, it is replaced. But if that data says that litter bin is not needed, then we remove it. But we will go to the town and parish council and say, we are removing this bin. If you want to replace that bin, you can do. But according to our information, it's not needed.
Okay, thank you. So you very neatly, Adrian, led me on to my next question, which is just about that. So I'm right in understanding that under the terms of the contract, there is no ability, I think what you said, there is a desire to take litter bins away that aren't working. So what ability do we have as a local authority to install new litter bins? And what happens where you take a litter bin out, we take a litter bin out, and you say the parish, you give the parishes the option to take it over. But what happens in the instance where the parish is very remote, doesn't really have a grounds maintenance contractor who they can actually employ to empty the 3 or 4 litter bins that they have? what do we do for those parishes? They're very small. They don't have the ability to raise significant precept. They don't have the ability to employ a grounds contractor to empty their bins. What do? We just abandon them, do we? And just allow the litter just to build up and say, sorry, nothing we can do about it. You need to take on that responsibility yourself. That doesn't chime very well with what I'm seeing coming from the council, which says that we are, you know, proud of picking up litter. We're proud of enforcing fly tipping. We're asking our residents to report litter being thrown out of vehicles, litter dumped, but we're not providing bins. It seems to me a bit kind of counterintuitive, and lots of mixed messages going out there.
I'm sorry if I give that mixed message. The issue we always start with is there a litter problem? If there's a litter problem, then the question actually is, what is the best way of picking it up? So if we actually have litter that is deposited in an area, litter bin may, and I repeat, may well be the best solution. It may well be the most cost-effective solution, may be the best solution of dealing with it, but it's just one of our tools. But we will look at all that data. We have, as you know, with the MyWilk system and our ARC system, we can pinpoint litter. And so we can actually identify what the best solution is. People do like litter bins because they're a visual provision of something. But the problem actually litter bins, I keep saying, I wish they worked. If they worked, I can assure you, and they delivered the best option for the communities, we would provide them. And we still do provide them where there's a need. But sadly, I would say I just wish they worked. But sadly, litter bins don't work for the majority of the litter that's out there. And so we have to look at alternatives. Enforcement is an alternative. Sometimes collecting litter is an alternative. Sometimes working with local groups is an alternative. Sometimes working, obviously, with the businesses that may be associated as a community is an alternative. But it's not, we don't automatically jump to litter bins, and litter bins have to be, for us to provide them, have to be a sort of something that's going to work. And even when we put them in, does it actually resolve the problem afterwards? And I gave you an example there, Chippenham, on the A350 around Chippenham. We put those litter bins in the lay-bys, and we actually saw an increase in the number of litter. And if you drive the A350, those litter bins are still there. And sadly, the A350 is one of our most heavily littered roads. We put them in there because that road was heavily littered, and it continues to be heavily littered. And we have to be bearing that in mind when we're looking at the solutions.
I understand that. And this is my final point. So are we basically saying that if a rural parish requires a litter bin, and you can't justify that bin being installed and emptied by ID Verdi, the parish councils are basically left to fund it themselves? Is that what we're saying here?
What I'm saying is, if there's litter, Wiltshire Council has a statutory responsibility to pick it up. That we are not asking the town and parish councils to pick it up. We work with town and parish councils, and they provide a vital tool. Town and parish councils they are immensely supporting to the Wiltshire Council with regards to what they do, but Wiltshire Council has a statutory duty, and we do not pass that statutory duty to anybody. If somebody reports litter, we will pick it up. If someone continues to report litter, we will find the best solution to it. It's just that litter bins might not be the best solution. They might be the best solution. We will never leave a parish council with our statutory duty. It is our responsibility to clear it, and we will clear it, and we have to clear it because there is a legal responsibility on us to clear it.
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be other members from rural areas who would maybe follow that up, but thank you. They're the end of my questions, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Alder. Thank you, Adrian. I think, Richard, did you have your hand up, or was it Chloe? Zoe, sorry. It was somebody on this side first, and then Dominic, and then Bill. I'm not sure who put their hand up. Was it?
Mr. Chairman, I have not yet put my hand up, and I will take a ticket because there were others. There were others in front of me. Was it you, Bridget? Are you guilty?
No, I was going to put my hand up.
Councillor Wayman is off the hook.
Apologise. In which case, I think we had Councillor Mums, then Councillor Parks, and then whoever wants to go over here. Zoe, then Bridget. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, but I didn't have my hand up either. This queue is out of control.
Clearly going to need some officer support on who's putting their hands up. Councillor Parks, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I did acknowledge I had my hand up, I think. If I may, I've got, I think, 3 questions to ask of officers. The first one is centred around contract performance and value for money. And you talked about NEC4 option, pain and gain mechanism. that ensures the council achieves maximum efficiency and cost savings. But what evidence is there that this approach delivers better outcomes compared to a traditional scheduler rates contract? My first question.
We had a scheduled rates contract by Ida Verde, actually delivered for the Balfour Beatty Living contract, and then Ida Verde Direct. The scheduler rates means that the council carries the risk of provision. And what I mean by that, for an excellent example, could well be town centre cleaning. So we schedule resources to that and we pay for the resources. The NEC4 contract, the way it's structured, passes the risk of that planning to the contractor for them to design the rounds to meet the outcome, i.e. clean town centres. By passing that risk on to the contractor, as I mentioned, the £400,000 savings when we identified, we went with the same outcomes, but with the risk being undertaken by the contractor to deliver those outcomes, with then the penalties being applied should they fail to meet those outcomes. And that originally delivered a £400,000 saving with the same outcomes, moving from an NEC 4 contract, in essence, schedule rates and NEC A contract. So it delivered a £400,000 savings with comparing the two outcomes by allowing the contractor to carry those risks. And the contractor still carries a lot of those risks for the increased costs above CPI today. So it's protected the council with regards to those scheduler rates that we would have covered had we not moved the risk to the contractor.
Just to help you out, Councillor Parks, as well. So the NEC4 target cost contract, an option C contract, has advantages in this circumstance because, for one, we know the scope of the activity that we want to undertake in any given year. So we know what's out there, we know what we want the contractor to do. The contractor can then work with us in providing a price for that work. So we have got that certainty of budget at the start of the year. We're able to scrutinise those costs that are being applied. As the contractor undertakes the work, they are paid at what they call defined cost. So their actual costs plus a fixed overhead and percentage, which is locked into the contract. So we only pay for what they actually do against that defined scope. With the scheduler rates, effectively, that's a shopping list for the contractor, and they can do as much and just keep charging us against the scheduler rates. So it puts us in greater control. So if there are changes to the contract, more litter bins, more area, the contractor has to come to us to ask permission to do that, do more, and we have to agree it. What it also gives is, because it sets a target, the contractor is incentivized through the contract to do it better, to do it quicker, to do it faster, to use other means, because the gain under that target, we share. So they would get some and we get some. So an option C is a very attractive prospect where you know what you're going to do, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Yes, that is helpful. And that nicely leads on to my second question, which is around budget and savings and the transparency. So we've heard a little about, I think it's £1.1 million of savings. And I do understand that some of that was asset transfer, service delegation, whatever you want to badge it. But those other savings, what assurance does this committee have that those savings did not negatively impact on service quality and statutory obligations?
I can assure you that £170,000 of those efficiency savings were costs that were incurred by Ida Verde, which, due to them being over their target that they'd set themselves, were funds that were withheld by the council. So what that means is, when you go over the target, the easiest way to explain is money. So say you have £1 million, the target's £1 million. If they spend 1.1 million, as David says, with defined costs, okay, what happens is, under the Ida Verde contract, we pay them 50 pence of every pound, 50%, and they carry that cost because it's at their risk. If they say they're going to do it for this cost, and we agree, and they do it for over that, the incentives are there to drive them to do it cheaper. The incentive of the option C contract is also even greater than that. If they deliver it for less than £1 million, then there's a pain gain going on there. But the £170,000 that I put in there was all due to that going over target spend. And so it did not impact at all on any service delivery. That is a calculation that's done at the end of the financial year on tasks where they have gone over their defined costs. So the service was provided and it was a withholdment of payments after the service has been delivered. That's the way the NEC4 contract works.
I'm only going to add to what Adrian's saying. So yeah, the flip side is with a target cost contract, if it goes over the target, we don't carry the entirety of that bill. That bill is then at the responsibility of the contractor to pay a significant proportion of that. I think in terms of maintaining the performance, I think what's really important, and Adrian's flagged that in the report, is the suite of key performance indicators, which hold that contractor to task throughout the duration of the delivery, the scope of that work over that year to make sure that they are performing. And then those key performance indicators give that measure. If they drop below that, there are mechanisms in the contract to then penalise them further.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. And moving on from those key performance indicators, and I think you mentioned that that determines the extension to the contract. Am I right in thinking those KPIs and the scoring is held within the officers of the service? And if that is so, is there an opportunity to perhaps allow the extension of that whereby maybe the parishes can score the contractor to truly reflect on the performance of the work that's been delivered?
Obviously, currently the current contract is based upon in essence, there are several scoring in there. The council scores the contract, and the contract actually scores the council in certain cases. The issue here would be the contract does define what we score on, and we have historically tried community scoring because it is a really, really important outcome. The problem is, and you think grass cutting and litter collection is really quite simple, but we've just mentioned like towns and parishes, and quite often the scoring reflects either a service requirement, which is actually the council. What I mean by that is sometimes the expectation of the community is actually greater than the contracts that the council has put out. So the level we put out the contract, and we quite often get scoring actually in a perception that we should be delivering a higher service when the contract's not that. That's one issue. The other issue as well is quite often it can be that the perception is for not just, because bear in mind we are only responsible for what we call relevant land, council-owned land. Land outside of that isn't ours. And so again, with regards to community involvement scoring, it gets quite complicated because quite often we're scored for other people's lands. We have tried that, and we have trialled actually going on site with inspectors and with the community. So there is that informed picture that was undertaken. We did trial that, but sadly that can be quite onerous on the council. And so it wasn't something that was built into the contract, but it was considered, and we did do those trials. We did do them.
Can I just add as well? And I think what I would say is that, you know, out of that suite of KPIs, there will be in there, if you like, a satisfaction score, so quite a subjective score. So I think we would welcome any feedback from towns and parishes to inform how we then go about scoring that. But the scoring has to remain with us. We're the ones that have the contractual relationship with that commercial supplier. Of the suite of KPIs, I would sort of like to flag that, you know, a number of those KPIs would be quantitative, so they would be based on fact of something that has been done. So there isn't a lot, there's no subjectivity involved in that. So it's very much a quantity around it. And the nature of KPIs in a commercial contract will be that a contractor will expect more quantitative ones than they will subjective, because there's a huge risk associated with subjective. We could just have a bad day and score them really badly. And they know that, and they will therefore then inflate their conditions to cover us having a bad day. So, you know, quantitative ones, but come back to feedback from parishes to help us score, really welcome. And what we do is regularly review our KPI scores with of our contractor, not just with them, but internally through our own governance meetings.
sorry, just one thing very important. I did miss, there is a survey that is done to town and parish councils annually, and they also survey the staff as well. So Ida Verde staff and the town and parish council staff are also surveyed, and that is in their social value element of the contract. So not that part, but it is in the social value part.
So thank you for that. That is very encouraging, that if there is some opportunity to introduce some feedback from the parishes, the rural communities, that would, I guess, I certainly would welcome that back here at perhaps a future meeting. Chair, if I may, my final question, and this is the aspect that really torments me, and this is all about sweeping and code of practice. My understanding is that the code of practice for litter and refuse is handled by the street scene, or within the street scene contract. You're entering of litter bins, you're picking up a fly posting. But am I correct in thinking that detritus along curbed roads is also within the code of practice for litter and refuse? And if that is so, I see very little evidence, and indeed you say in Appendix E, sweeping and road sweeping is undertaken by local highways. And this causes me great concern out in the rural parts of the county, because I see no evidence at all of much sweeping being undertaken. If that is the code of practice for litter and refuse, what indicators have we got that that is being done?
Councillor Parks, you are correct. The street scene contract, the list of activities, highway sweeping, is not within the Ida Verde contract, so you are correct. You are also correct that detritus is actually in the Code of Practice for Litter and Refuse, and the council has a statutory duty to sweep that when it becomes to an unacceptable standard. And you're also correct, it is actually comes under the local highway service and their sweepers. We do an annual inspection undertaken by or actually in relation to the contract, but there is an annual inspection that is undertaken, which does include detritus actually on the highway. And so next year I can include the results actually of the, in essence, parish survey and town survey in the report. And I can also include what's called used to be called the old BVPI 199 results, and that does include both litter, but it also does cover detritus, because that is a measure. We do collect that. It's not within the report because it's not sitting within the street scene contract, but we do measure it, and I can bring that back next year when we do the report.
So, sorry, Chair. So in conclusion then, if we observe and the parishes observe curbed rural roads with almost lost with detritus, should that go to highways or should it go to street scene?
Councillor Parks, the My Wilk system, I would ask everybody to report on the My Wilk system, and it would automatically send it to local highways. It would automatically send it to local highways. Right. The Councillor Parks is right. There's something that's called the Code of Practice for Litter and Refuse, and it's online. If you go on there, and they're apt, for people like me, there's photos. So to help me out, there is a photo of A, B, C, and D, and to make it even more complicated, Councillor Wayman, is what they actually do is they divide, a bit like highways, they divide it up into different areas. So depending upon where you are, the standard and the time in which the council responds to is different. But the issue is you send it in, My Wilks will automatically pass it through to Mr. Clark's team in local highways.
Very, very finally, so
Okay.
where we have seen rural curved roads completely lost with detritus, leaves and the like, I'm guessing that would be judged as code of practice, whatever it is.
Right, we're getting very detailed now here. Okay, leaves. Leaves are not detritus. So when autumn falls and leaves come down, there is no statutory requirement. Leaves are actually omitted from the Code of Practice for Litter and Refuse. However, where you are correct is when leaves rot and become detritus, rotten leaves is part of the classification actually of detritus. So you are quite right. It's actually that terminology, and the assessment is done because every year, this time of year, you're quite right, we get numerous reports of leaves. There is a programme to deal with heavily leafed areas because that heavily leafed areas will become detritus. So there is a programme, but leaves are not detritus, but rotten decayed leaves are.
Thank you, Councillor Parks, for those questions and the officers for their answers. I'm just to acknowledge, I can see Graham Wright wanted to ask a question, but I will go round the committee questions first and then come back to you, Graham, because you're not on the committee. The next one I've got on my list is Councillor Carbin.
Yeah, I think it's mostly been covered, really. Jim, I was just picking up on the litter bin point. I think in the rural areas, most of the litter seems to be dog waste now. So I've just, and obviously, number of dogs is increasing, presumably, since COVID. A lot of people got their dogs. I just wondered how that's impacting on the collection and so on. One of my villages uses the Women's Institute, and they're incredibly efficient at keeping the village clean of litter, so I can recommend that to anybody. I did wonder, just in the executive summary, you mentioned it as well, what EMR stood for, as in EMR funding.
It's earmarked reserve. Councillor, it's earmarked reserve.
And about dog faeces, another interesting, dog faeces is classed as litter. However, again, sadly, and this is where I think Councillor Parks may where we're coming from, with regards to litter, it's back down to the Code of Practice for Litter and Refuse. So if you get one single pile of dog faeces, we wouldn't respond to that. But if you were to get numerous piles of dog faeces, then we do. Everything is captured. Dog faeces used to go into what was called dog bins, but they changed the classification on waste on that, which meant that it had to go be and treated somewhere special because of the nature of dog waste if it's concentrated. But if you mix dog waste with litter, it becomes ordinary household waste, and hence that's why you have mixed litter bins. If anyone wants to know why Wiltshire Council doesn't have dog waste bins, so if you see dog waste bins, they will be a parish council provision. With regards to ours, they are all mixed litter bins because then they can go off to one disposal route rather than going off to more expensive sort of treatment plants.
Thank you. No, good. Fine. Okay. So next I have Councillor Clewer, then Councillor Munns. I don't know if Councillor Wayne wants to ask a question. Okay.
Thank you very much indeed. I was going to start at a different point, but you've got me going with the dog excrement, I'm afraid. That comes up quite regularly at the tasking group for My Wilts, and I was fairly horrified when I was showing a resident how to use My Wilts, and then with my 2 instances in my own parish and the one in White Parish where I live, I then got a message, and presumably so did she, that this was not a qualifying quantity of dog mess, and therefore it wasn't going to be dealt with. And I think that's a reputational issue for My Wilts, and we either deal with it as one dollop or not, because it matters. I mean, nobody wants to play hopscotch with this stuff. It's not pleasant, but you don't want to be walking or wheeling through it with a wheelchair or a child or a bike. Just so very unpleasant. Can we not just deal with it? Or the alternative is to take it off My Wilts if we are not going to deal with it. Who saves up several dollops or goes on a tour to map these little deposits? I mean, this is bonkers. So please do start with that one. Thank you.
This is actually, it's very, because when you're talking about dog feces to me, and I understand the nature of dog feces.
Good.
But for ourselves, for an officer, obviously, from my side, dog feces is litter. I do understand the argument. There are 2 things we have to do. Is we actually have to capture reports and prove that we've complied with our statutory responsibility. We can't sadly just say we're not going to do it, but we have to consider it. So when it comes to Code of Practice of Litter and Refuse, we have to make an informed decision of those ones that we don't respond to and those ones that we do. So that's why we capture it, we make an informed decision, and then if we ever challenge the reason why we haven't done it, we've got a clear path and clear reasoning why we haven't done it. It is one of these, so that is the reason why, and the reason, again, with regards to where we set the standard of cleansing, with litter responses, we have set that standard of, in essence, evidence at the Code of Practice of Litter and Refuse level. So those photos I've spoken about in the Code of Practice of Litter and Refuse. Where it is bad, we have actually put in quicker times. So we're not talking about the same times in the Code of Practice of Litter and Refuse, but we do use those threshold to respond to complaints, and that's what we've done, and that is what the contract price is based upon.
I'm afraid I will fight you on this every day of the week, because I don't agree that we should be able to report one deposit and yet in some circumstances not deal with it. I can't explain that to my residents, although I do accept that if you have a very wide pavement with a bit of grassed verge and deposit 1 is on the pavement, you may choose to deal with that one and not deposit 2, which is in the grass. But I think everybody here can see the nonsensical nature of the way that is set up, and I will keep going on about it in the My Wilts debate. But for now, moving on to what was going to be my first question, please could we, through the chair, have the acronyms we're using in reports explained and spelt out the very first time they're used, because I went on a little bit of a wild goose chase, and even in the government documents didn't find the earmarked reserves definition, but I did get a bit tangled up with the East Midlands Railway. So I'm pleased to be out of that particular logjam. On page 11, about the budget for the coming year, are you seeing the budget that you'd like to set to be about the same, plus inflation, and taking account of any NIC increases that we're having to cope with as local authorities? So that is my next question. How are you dealing with the budget pressures, and where is that sitting in the service at the moment? Thank you.
With regards to budget next year, obviously we are in budget discussions as we speak at this moment in time. As head of service, no, I am not anticipating an inflation increase, and I agree with that, not an inflation increase to the Ida Verde contract. So next year we will be holding the current budget as it is. We do not see that having any impact upon service delivery, as we will be seeing, I believe, obviously that's what we do with the forecasts. We should be able to cope with that with the same service standards, but being delivered by those efficiency savings that I've spoken about to yourselves. So that is just a financial decision, not on any service reduction at all. That's purely based around the efficiency savings in which the Ida Verde contract is based.
Thank you very much. I'd like to talk a little bit, if I may, about road sweeping, which is another one of those bugbears, and one does see instances of not just stones building up at the edge of curbs, between the junction between the road and the curb, and sometimes even between the footway and whatever is at the hard boundary of it. What I'd like to know are these few things, please. I now know it sits within highways, so presumably you can tell me how many machines we have at work across the county doing these things as well. I don't see much manual going on, but maybe that's more town councils and so on. But I'd like to know how many machines we've got that we could deploy on our roads or pavements, and perhaps how often we ought to expect to see them. I'd like to know, because it doesn't tell us on page 17, how many miles of road sweeping we've done, and whether that's on pavements or roads, and whether we take note of those islands within the carriageway. Quite often you'll see those yellow and blue white lit bollards, you know, breaking the carriageway into two, and those are quite a collection point as well. The trouble is, once we get soil and dust in there, it actually becomes a habitat which starts to break up the road, or even the junction between the curb and the pavement. You get the idea. In the end, this will cost us money if we don't weed spray it with something powerful enough to deal with the job and then sweep it. And where we need to, where a hole has developed, fill it. So that is one I know that comes up at the parishes regularly, and I do report it sometimes with mixed success. Thank you.
I can answer some of those questions. There are 5 sweepers that local highways have got. The schedules, what I would propose we do in the miles swept is I'm sure that local highways will be in front of this group at some point. Oh,
So there will be, obviously, we're here talking about the ID Verdi contract. It's not in the scope of the ID Verdi contract. So road sweeping will come back and we'll be able to provide an update when we go through an update for the term maintenance contract. If that's helpful.
So, Councillor Thur, I've got a plethora of questions now, having had very few at the start, so we're going to have to move quite quickly. Do you want to do one more?
I'm moving from canter to gallop. Excellent, thank you. In this contract, do we include any road sign cleaning? Because sometimes, although vegetation is obscuring a sign, it can be that algae's grown over. I appreciate that sometimes that will need a road closure, but is sign cleaning where it's needed included?
That's within the term maintenance contract, so not the ID Verdi contract.
Thank you. And moving on to fly tipping, I'm very proud of the work that you've been doing there. But what I know is a huge frustration to people is, and I've reported some myself this week, where the fly tipper has pulled up and poked what they wish to deposit through the hedge onto private land. That seems a gross injustice to me, that just because of the positioning, a ruler's length this way or that, it becomes someone else's responsibility. And that also is one that's pretty difficult to explain, and it feels unfair. Do we have a policy on that, and is there any more that we could do to help our poor, beleaguered farmers?
so the issue here is enforcement. We enforce on all land if there's evidence. So it's not an enforcement issue. The issue here is and we're actually, an example, we're just doing an Operation Barnow at the moment in time on MOD, all the Salisbury Plain. There is so much private land. That's the issue you've got. And we understand, and I must admit, private landowners have my greatest sympathy, not just farmers, MOD, National Trust, English Heritage. The problem is we can only do with what we've got, and even that obviously is costing the council obviously many hundreds of thousands of pounds. It all comes back in the same to litter. It's all about responsible waste management, and if people didn't drop it in the first place, it would not be a cost the council's got to pay. And that is a message that we're trying to put out there with, in essence, don't mess with obviously Wiltshire campaign, what we're putting out there with the We're Targeting Fly Tipping, the Barnow campaigns and all that. But it is a problem, and I do sympathise for that, but we cannot clear private waste on private land.
Thank you. Last one, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Very quick, please.
Which is, at the very beginning of your green-backed report, I saw a picture of one of those CCTV machines on a tower in a cage. At that lay-by I was just mentioning, there was one there. It's now moved. My question is, do we still have the same number of those that we did have? And when does that contract end? And will we be renewing it? Because that proved an enormous deterrent. After it had been set on fire and replaced, it was doing very well.
In answer to the question, the issue with those, no, we're not doing those anymore. We've actually moved over to more covert, because you are right about the visual ones. The problem with the visual ones, they are very susceptible to vandalism. So we do have some overt, we do have some, but due to the risk that overt faces, we are mainly now covert, so you don't see them, but you will see them in the press releases that are going out with enforcement, because they are one of our major ways of collecting evidence. So sadly, those big yellow things have gone, which are very visual, and they do deter litter, fly tipping at that point. But we've moved now to covert, so we're actually catching people, and hopefully, but we have put signs out to try and tell people that we are operating covert across the county.
Is it possible for councillors to suggest locations where those covert cameras might be? That is my final question. Thank you for indulging it.
Covert's based upon evidence, and that's why we need the My Wilts one to actually put it out there, because there are legal requirements. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor and Adrian, for those answers. So I've got Councillor, if people could be concise with their questions now, because we are running short time on this item. I've got Councillor Munns, Councillor Wayman, Councillor Wakeman, and I think that's probably it. After that, I've got a question as well. All right, Councillor Taylor, I'll let you have the last one. Oh, you're okay. All right.
Thank you, Chair. Take you back to roadside detritus. I thought that was really interesting. The direction to report on My Wilts is good. I can imagine My Wilts is probably inundated with tickets about roadside detritus at this time of year, but that distinction was really interesting between fallen leaves and rotted leaves, you know, maybe in a month or so's time. There's probably an opportunity there, I would think, to create some sort of document that could go out to parish councils, to members, to residents, literally on roadside detritus, to make that distinction between the two. That will, I would think, reduce the number of false My Wilts reports, you know, for fallen leaves. Also, it introduces, on that note, you mentioned sort of a photographic guide that you have as officers. So including something like that will help residents and parishes to determine which is reportable and which is not. It also brings in an opportunity to remind people that fallen leaves, whilst it's not a statutory responsibility for the council to remove them, it would be worthwhile the parish steward or volunteers to remove them, particularly from drains where they could block and then create flooding issues as well. So I don't know if we can request that of officers, that we put something together like that. Thank you.
Very, very happy to take it as an action. If you want to record that as an action from this, is the fact that we do comms. Very good point on flooding. That's a very, very valid point this time of year, and it's something that we do push, but we ought to push more of. So happy to take that away.
Thank you, Councillors. We'll put that down as a recommendation and see if everybody's agreed with that, which I think they will. Councillor Wayman.
Hi. Thank you, Adrian. Of course, we used to do monthly town and parish council newsletter, which was full of all that sort of information. I think you should resurrect it. My question was about paragraph 20. It talks about Ivy Verde using hydrogenated vegetable oil in place of presumably diesel or petrol. Is this more expensive than normal fuels? And, well, if you'd like to answer that first.
Yes, hydrated vegetable oil carries about, I would say, about a 20% increase in cost over than diesel. Yes.
Thank you very much. So why aren't we, I mean, I know it talks about their meeting their contract carbon requirements, but if we're looking at cost savings, I wonder how many miles Ivy Verde are travelling each year and whether there could be a significant cost saving. I assume at some point in the future the depots will be able to have charging points so that the contractor can then switch to EV vehicles, but I don't know when that is planned, because I know that there were problems with trying to get an electricity supply to all of our depots, or sufficient electricity supply to all of our depots.
The outcome was, when we tendered, we gave all the contractors an option about how they on delivering a carbon plan. Ivy Verde's carbon plan was actually a carbon neutral carbon plan by 2030, but also the fact in the first year of their contract they committed through their funding, because I believe, I think that it's a national thing they actually do, but under our contract they committed to HVO to bring their carbon commitment down, and with hand tools on year one of the contract. So running HVO was a decision that they made. It was a decision they put in their carbon plan, and it was a decision they delivered. So it wasn't a requirement of the council. It was their own proposal in their own plan in the carbon outcomes. So yes, it is included in their costs, but it was included in obviously in that decision about when we entered them on price. They were the cheapest provider running on HVO, but that was a decision that they made.
Okay, thank you. But I assume then that we could still make further savings in the contract if we didn't insist on them using HVO, if it cost 20% more. And my other, I mean, I know I sound like, I don't know what I sound like, Mrs. Scrooge or something. But with the social contract work, now presumably the costs of doing that are also built into Ivy Verde's contract. I don't know whether town and parish councils consider that worthwhile, or whether we could make a further saving there if that sort of contract or that sort of clause wasn't included in the contract. That's just my comment. I don't know. I've got another question, quick one in a minute.
Just to say again, with regards to like all those, the carbon, the social value, you were right that it will be covered in their costs. But when we tendered to all the contractors, we didn't state what the social value would look like, what the carbon commitment would look like, or the other quality elements. It was them that actually provided it. I can't remember how they compared to others, but all I can say is their target price within the award of the contract was cheaper than any other provider. So that's all I can actually say with regards to, but it was a decision that they made to put that into their target price.
Okay, thank you. But I just assume, though, at some point, I mean, it was the way the contract is probably written, and maybe if those sorts of things weren't included, the prices could be lower, and we could make some savings there. Now, our final question was just about the transfer of play areas. I think you say there's 6 remaining, and is the intention to transfer those?
That's going to be a decision for the council, and what they do is they're the raw play areas. So we do have a number of town ones as well. There's probably over 1,000 play areas within the county of Wiltshire. We're probably going to be left with probably 10 thereabouts. At that point, that will be in essence, a decision for the council. What do they wish to do with our 10? The issue here is those 10 will all have been made a decision by those local communities that when offered a transfer with funding, they said no. So we have to take everything into consideration and bear in mind that all the other towns and parishes that took them on, but that will not be my decision. That will be something we're up together and report for a later decision by the council. There's no decision made on those at the moment in time.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. I mean, I know that plenty of parish councils, particularly in my area, they all operate their own play areas, and they get a bit peeved that they feel that it's a form of double taxation. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. So, Councillor Wakeman.
Thank you, Chair. Adrian, I think I'm going to follow on with the HVO actually, but I'm going to come from a slightly different perspective. I'm glad to see it on there, see a carbon commitment on there. It aligns with the council's stated aims. HVO itself has slightly murky credentials in the world of climate change. Do we have any opportunity to encourage Early Verdi to work towards electrification and move away from HVO?
This is the challenge the council's grappling with at the moment in time, and the new depots would definitely help. The electrification, I'm also head of fleet, and I will be quite honest, I'm grabbing all the power I can for your scope 1. And so at the moment in time, if there is power supply in the depots, I am nabbing it for Wiltshire Council vehicles, and that will obviously be in front of you in another time with regards to how we're doing with electrification. But that does cause issues with regards to contractors who are in our depots, because sadly I am taking the power up to the DNO. Alex is going to talk about this, but up to the transformers. So where it's cost effective to do, I'm taking all that power. So the contractors are limited at the moment in time to what they can do because of that. But the new depot programme that the council is looking at the whole provision, scope 1 and scope 3. But at the moment in time, sadly, our focus is on scope 1 and saying to the contractor, if we take the power of scope 1, what can you do with scope 3? So they have gone HVO, they've done the hand tools being electric. They will go, they would love to go to electric, but we haven't got the power at this moment in time in the depots to allow that to happen. But their HVO is sustainable. So we do check the source of the HVO to make sure that it's not, in essence, palm oil.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great answer. That's what I was hoping. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll do my question and then we'll come on to Councillor Wright, who's been waiting patiently. So one's really a comment more than a question, and I don't need an answer now. But with respect to the KPIs, quite a few of them seem to be simply statements of totals. Could we see a bit more focus on relative performance to expectation and outcome? So some of the KPIs are just a metric, which doesn't really tell us more than that's what happened. So I'd like to see a bit more of that sort of aiming towards a particular quality outcome or quantity outcome. And then the second question was with respect to grass cutting regimes. Obviously, the wildflower regimes are saving us money because it means less cutting and in the long run it's sort of lower management. Have we reached that full potential now, or are we still moving on with that despite the problems we've got in them actually flowering? Thank you.
You're asking the wrong person, because I would say no. For me, and because it's a personal perspective, isn't it? For me, you have active play areas and then you have areas that are unused. And I love to see the natural fauna and flora. I love to see, obviously, the grass growing and even the nettles and the brambles and those sort of things, as long as it's safe. There are many, many areas still out there that could actually be converted, but you've got to take the community with you. And we found that a massive experience. We moved too quickly. When that 400,000 square meters, we got really excited. We went out there, and as we mentioned before, the communications is vital. So what we've got to do as we move forward is a lot more communications around the benefits and why we're doing it. We have to accept that some members of the community aren't supportive of that, and they do like to see very short grass. So there is opportunity on non-play areas to do more. It needs to be planned, and that's part of this programme. We've sort of set ourselves a target now of 5% increase every single year of our target. So we're trying to eke it forward where we can. There's looking at maximising play space, but also looking at really unused space, verges, etc., that we could just simply reduce that cutting from. So the answer is, I believe, but it's only my opinion, that we could do more. Others would say that we've gone far enough.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Okay, final question to Councillor Wright, who's online.
Thank you very much, Chair. Not sure if you can see me or not, but my camera is on. Anyway, my question, it's really just a compliment. I haven't heard a lot of thanks from your committee so far. I may be very lucky living in Darrington and the service I get from everybody, but under the restraints that we obviously have, I think the service and the report is excellent. I've written down as I listened, community-led, community-led, community solutions. A lot of what we've spoken about is around, flowers need to be community-led, Adrian. I think that's the way you get the flowers to grow properly in those areas. And rubbish is community-led. It's the community who put it down, and the community need to make the solution. As far as bins go, you've been brilliant for us. You have removed some bins that were not used well, but some that have been damaged by our wonderful young people have been replaced. So I have nothing else to say other than I think your interaction with the parish council is brilliant, and I would just say well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I think Councillor Smith wants to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for your contributions this morning. I think it's been really, really useful and interesting. And obviously, myself and the officers will be sort of making the most of that feedback. Just wanted to touch on one or two issues that the conversation is centred upon. I do sympathise with the Highways guys in trying to get wildflowers to grow. I mean, Sustainable Shurston in our village has been trying for 4 years to get a wildflower meadow going underneath the community orchard, and these are people that know what they're doing, and they're still struggling to get that happen. So it is quite difficult, and but I think we need to persevere in this challenge. On to litter and the sort of the difficulties with that and the social value elements of the contract that's been mentioned. I think one of the important things for me about the social value is that it leverages a lot of volunteer hours to actually tackle this problem and to basically help communities make that issue go away. So I think that's a really key part of the contract, and I would like to see that continued. And then on the sort of comms to towns and parish councils, I mean, we do actually send out a monthly update from Highways and Transport to towns and councils and parish councils, and also we do send a lot of information out to members. So I think we're sort of doing our best in that space, but obviously if there's other bits of information that people need, then please let us know. So yeah, thank you again for all your comments.
Thank you, Martin. Just on the social value, it is a legal requirement, of course, that the contractors do this. I would like to see it advertised better, though, because I know there's quite a few groups in my area that weren't aware that they could get some funding through that mechanism, so that would be useful. Thank you. Dave, did you want to add anything, or in response to Graham's comment? No. All right, thank you very much. In that case, I'll come to the recommendations. So the proposals are as follows, and Councillor Munns, if you will pipe up if you think that's not quite what you had in mind, but this is what we've got. That the Select Committee notes the contents of the report and performance of the street scene and grounds maintenance contract for 2024-25. Number 2, we request a further update on service provision to this committee at a future meeting to include feedback on the 6 wildflower trials, the number of litter bins and the frequency of emptying, as well as feedback from town and parish councils. Number 3, we request an update on road sweeping when the Highways Review of Service report comes to the committee. And finally, that we request that officers communicate with towns and parishes about the work that is in scope of the street scene contract and the definition of roadside detritus and road sweeping. Thank you, Simon, for drafting those. And does that meet Councillor Munns? You want to say something?
Could you just maybe add something slightly there? Sorry, read the last sentence to me again.
Yeah, request that officers communicate with town and parish councils about the work that is in scope of the street scene contract and the definition of roadside detritus and roadside sweeping.
If you could just add on, and how parishes and residents can alert the council to the issues and take action themselves, something like that.
And members.
That was exactly
Sorry,
the point I was hoping to make, Mr. Chairman, that
Yes.
we don't get these town and parish council notes, so we don't know what's being said, and we can't either learn anything or support them in pursuing any of these activities.
Thank you. So, have you added those words, Simon? I'll read that again. Just bear with us.
I can't type that quickly. Okay, so to revise that. So request that officers communicate with town and parish councils about the work that is in scope of the street scene contract and the definition of roadside detritus and roadside sweeping, and how parishes, residents and members can take action themselves.
I think it's to inform town and parishes and members.
So when that email goes out, please could members be copied in?
Okay,
So
just
A,
for-
we know what's
yeah.
being said, and B, we can help our parishes achieve whatever goals come out of that communication. Thank you.
Okay.
Just bear with us while Simon retypes that.
Just put inform members basically into that. I don't think we need to read it out again. Should we just, is that everyone happy with that?
And we're just basically making it a member briefing note.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you.
that's the officers will sort of fine tune that, but I think we get the message completely. So is everybody happy with those recommendations? Nobody's objecting to it. Thank you very much. So that was, and thank you very much to Martin and the officers for their contributions. Moving on to the next item, which is the task group update, so that Graham can get away for his next meeting. So they're on page 135 to 142 of the agenda pack. So Councillor Munns, who is chairman of the Waste Transformation Task Group, will introduce the report from the task group.
Thank you, Chair. So the Waste Transformation Programme itself commenced in 2023 to deliver necessary changes which will make waste services more efficient, more effective, but also ensure that they comply with legislative changes such as the Environment Act and also simpler recycling. On the 9th of September this year, the Environment Select Committee agreed to set up a task group to scrutinise the Waste Transformation Programme. The task group will provide effective scrutiny of discussions and decisions, ensuring that they are evidence-based, offer the best value for the council, comply with legislation, and have taken due consideration of implications on residents. The task group had its first meeting on the 26th of September this year, and this initial meeting provided the background and context to the Waste Transformation Programme. What I'm going to do, just very briefly, is give ESC members an overview of the programme. It is huge, it is complex, it's vital for many reasons. And through the Waste Transformation Group, or sorry, rather through the programme itself, what the council will be looking to do is to re-procure 5 contracts which expire next year, review 2 landfill diversion contracts, which run until 2033 and 2038, review the approach to household recycling centres, add 2 new services for food waste and flexible plastics, and introduce a new collection infrastructure across the county. And that's currently being trialled in an area of Chippenham before it needs to go live in 2027. So as you can appreciate, scrutiny of this programme is vital. And so the recent restrictions that were placed on part 2 on commercially sensitive information presented, in my view, an insurmountable barrier to the group's ability to scrutinise. So I shared my concerns with Nick and with Graham, and I took the step of cancelling the Waste Transformation Group meetings until a solution to part 2 could be found. Now, as Nick reported at the start of the meeting, a resolution has now been found, which will allow scrutiny to restart. But that said, I just want to thank Sarah Valdes and her team for bringing a proposal to me last week, which would see slight restructuring of the presentations from the waste teams to enable that scrutiny to move ahead. So I'm thankful to her for that. So accordingly, the task group will meet again next week. We should be in full steam, I hope. All rests on Perry, no pressure. But I look forward to reporting back to this committee at the next meeting. So an update without really giving you much of an update. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Have we got any questions? Councillor Furr.
Thank you. Not on this in particular, but I did notice within the task group update, we don't seem to have the My Wilts. And so through you, Chair, I wondered if Graham might wish to add anything, because it's just not there on the agenda papers.
It's not one of our task groups, that's why.
Oh, I see. That's
open
completely
scrutiny.
separate. Oh, please forgive me. Thank you.
That's
It just
right.
felt like we discussed that. Where does it sit then?
Under overview and scrutiny, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, my apologies. I do apologise.
Okay. So if there are no further questions, or no questions for Councillor Munns, I'll move on to the update from Councillor Wright on the climate emergency task group. Over to you, Graham. Well, we can see you now.
Yeah, thank you. That's because I had the camera turned off.
Okay.
You think it's on, but the little slider wasn't on. So, fine. Thanks very much. Can I just start with the task group that was referred to just a minute ago? That's the My Wilts. Just very quickly, it's running really brilliantly. We are making huge progress. So that's another positive. But let me deal with climate emergency. So the task group had its first meeting on the 3rd of October, where they elected me as the chairman of the group, and thank you for that. It's been a long-standing task group. We've been at this many years. The task group discussed the update report, which went to Cabinet on the 7th of October and to full council on the 21st. And we note that the council is on track to be carbon neutral by 2030. This is due to property decarbonisation, fleet decarbonisation, and zero emissions green energy tariff. For county-wide greenhouse gas emissions, the council has mapped out a pathway to 2030. The county is not on the trajectory, but follows closely the pathway for the rest of the country. Wiltshire emissions are reducing very slowly. The task group also asked, in regard to the biggest challenges in getting the 2030 target, the potential for offsetting, how to support the wider county to reduce emissions, for example, via better public transport and retrofitting homes. The task group asked about the adaptation to changes in the weather and preparedness for flooding, and about lower emissions through procurement. Now, we do have a forward work programme of which we have 9 areas. We are slightly slow off the mark this year because we haven't really had a meeting of any huge impact, but we will be. Any questions, please, Chair?
So any questions from the committee for Councillor Wright? I don't think so, Graham. So thank you very much for that update. Thank you. Coming to the end of that item, the proposals from the committee are that the Select Committee notes the update on the task group's activities for both those task groups, and notes the Waste Transformation Task Group Forward Work Plan Appendix 1 and the Climate Emergency Task Group's Draft Forward Work Plan Appendix 2. Is everybody happy with that? Thank you very much. So that takes us on to the next item, which is item 7, the local electric vehicle infrastructure, or LEVI, or levy, however you want to pronounce it, project. The report is on page 21 to 134 of your agenda pack. Councillor Martin Smith, the Cabinet Member for Highways, Street Scene and Flooding, will introduce the report. Over to you, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is obviously the delivery of public residential EV charging infrastructure. I think we all know the reasons behind this initiative, but the one I want to highlight is that by 2030, it's estimated that roughly 30% of all registered vehicles on our roads will be EVs. And currently, we only have 5%, which is fully electric. So there's quite a way to go. And obviously, the charging infrastructure nationally needs to be beefed up quite considerably to cope with that. The funding for this project comes from the Department for Transport via the levy support body and the pavement channel grant funding area. The levy part is divided into two lots. There's the urban lot that it covers primary and large settlements, so that's the larger towns, the market towns. And we're identifying priority target areas for standard AC chargers suitable for overnight charging. This is for residents that don't have the luxury of off-street parking. And the areas chosen will balance sort of commercial viability with social equity of the provision. And the methodology for this urban lot is found from page 31 in the agenda and goes into considerable detail on the scoring model being used. Then there's the rural lot, which focuses on large villages. This will be a mix of AC standard chargers and DC rapid charging. The AC will be for overnight residents charging, and the DC is targeting residents in the surrounding catchment, giving them the chance to charge rapidly whilst using local amenities. The criteria for sites in this lot includes the number of residents parking on the street, the number of village amenities, and the layout of the road network, and one or two other criteria. Again, there's a lot of supporting detail on that from page 77 in the agenda. The briefing note on the cable channels, which is for cross-pavement charging, that starts on page 119. This shows the preferred type of cable channel for the pilot phases and details the sort of charges that will be made on residents for installing them. And again, on page 105, there are details of the contract to be used and the soft market testing that's been undertaken to fine-tune that approach. So, in summary, I think this is a most detailed, comprehensive and excellent report, and I commend the officers for providing it. So on that note, I'll hand over to Alex.
Thanks very much.
Can you switch your microphone on, Alex?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Dr. Alex Robotham. I am the EV infrastructure strategy lead in the EVI team, and we sit in the Highways Major Projects. That was a really good introduction and overview. I have put together a short presentation, and I'd like to share that with you now, as long as my technical abilities will allow that. Excellent. Yeah, so it's going to concentrate a little bit more on the context for this project. Wiltshire is different than all the other counties, and we need to make sure that we reflect that in the proposal for the EV infrastructure that we build. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We're putting a new infrastructure in place, something that hasn't existed before. And that's going to be really important to see the success of the transition over to electric powered vehicles. Wiltshire has some things that are working, let's say, making it more difficult. We're the 6th largest county in England. We've got a big split of rural communities, pretty much 50-50 on our residents. But there are also some other things that are going to work in favour. We have high vehicle ownership reliance, and we've had a decent uptake of EV adoption, slightly over the UK average. The state of play at the moment with EV charging infrastructure, you'll see on the left, this is the latest DFT scoring from October. They use a 100k devices per 100k population metric, so we can measure against other places. And we are faring reasonably well on the southwest against the other southwest, which is most comparable. And I think what is really important there is seeing what London is doing. And this emphasises that EVI works really well and can be deployed at really high scale in urban areas. However, Wiltshire is not one dense urban area, and that's why our figures are as they are at the moment. Over on the right, you can see the build-up of public charges across the UK in total, and see that we're on a rapid increase year by year. But you'll notice the colour changes there. And that is that it is the high-powered, ultra-rapid chargers that you'll see on the strategic network that have been getting a lot more growth. That's where commercial companies see the most, keenest profit at the moment. And the residential charging is kind of lagging behind in a growth rate. And that points towards one of the biggest issue at the moment with accessing charging for electric vehicles. If you can fit a home charger, then you're very happy. It's a very convenient way of charging. It's at least about 3 times less than cost than the public charging. But you can only fit a home charger if you meet the requirements of permitted development. And the key one there is you need some off-street parking. So if you're parking on street, you can't have a home charger at the moment. And that's leading to bad decisions by residents, as evidenced by the trailing a cable across the pavement on the right. And that's bad news because it's introducing trip hazards, electric hazards onto the public highway, something we really want to avoid. And as a matter of scale, we've had data showing that 24% of the households in Wiltshire are parking on street. If we were to look at the model predictions about growth in EV uptake there and map that onto our residents who are parking on street, at the moment you'd estimate there's about 3,000 EV drivers who are in this situation. Once we get to 2030 with predicted level of EV uptake, we'll be looking at nearly 30,000 drivers in that position. And those trailing cables aren't something we want to scale accordingly. So we need to have public charging in place for them and other options to access home charging. We've modelled, or I say DFT have modelled how many devices are going to be necessary in the future to meet this predicted demand. And those are in a little chart at the bottom there. The key thing to look at is that the fast and standard AC chargers, the things that people can charge overnight at, they're predicting over 1,000% increase is going to be necessary. Whereas the rapid chargers and ultra rapid chargers, that's running around 200, just over 200%. So we're confident that the commercial entities will cover the increase in rapid chargers, but we need some help making sure that we've got the fast and standard chargers we need. And that's where the government's recognised that issue and has made the local electric vehicle infrastructure Levi funding available to all councils in the UK. It's got some provisos on it. It needs to be spent on building low-speed on-street residential charging, and we have to work with the private sector to access industry knowledge and investment. We received 676k capability funding, and that's paid for an EVI team at Wiltshire, who will be in place long enough to see this contract in place. And also we've accessed just shy of 3.9 million in capital funding, which we have secured and is with the council now. The approach that we are taking at the moment is that we're following the advice given by the advisory board set up by government, so Energy Saving Trust, PA Consulting, Cenex, and DFT-led industry engagement. They've all come up with recommendations about how councils should approach this. We selected a route to market with a concession contract, so that allows us to access private commercial funding and knowledge, but also represents a good risk balance of risk and control for the council. So we get some input in what charging is being provided and where, but we are deferring most of the risk onto the commercial partner. We've decided to use the Crown Commercial Services concession contract, and that was a choice once it became available. We were following the NEC4 framework model, but our legal teams were advising that it was poor fit with the concession, and the Crown Commercial Services had the backing of the Levi Advisory Board, so that's the way we've gone. Details on the contract is that the charge point operator, or CPO, partner would build, operate and maintain the chargers. It would be a 15-year contract, which represents an agreed balance between the council and commercial interests. I think the councils wanted 5 years, the CPOs wanted 25, so we settled on 15. And we'll make sure we've got a range of KPIs in place to monitor the effective build and ongoing performance of the chargers, especially around reliability. In regards to finances, we are proposing a margin cap on the tariff. What that means is we're going to effectively means we're controlling it so that it remains affordable to the residents. We're looking at the contract not costing the council anything. So we don't want to have any costs to the council built into this. So the initial start of the contract, there will be an administration fee. So that'll cover a contract manager. And then once the contract starts producing enough revenue, we will be given a revenue share as a council income from that, from the contract. We're estimating that on the range of capital investment that we've seen so far, we could get a CPO investment of 62% around, which would give a £10 million total capital project, and we are asking for a minimum of 2,000 charges from that. We think that is achievable based on the average unit costs we've been given through soft market research. The timescales at the moment are that we're getting the contract ready for review by the funders in January next year. Planning to go to issue the ITT in February, all going well, and then we predict that the contract will be issued August next year, with some negotiations prior to that. Just some details on the Levi and how it's being split up. So we will have two lots, urban lot and a rural lot, and the urban lot will look to deploy standard AC chargers, things that are suitable for residents to charge overnight, and we will be looking to deploy at scale, but focused to the area where we have identified the need, where the most residents are parking on street. We are asking for a range of technology to be available and deployed so that it can fit the context. The rural lot we're hoping to have in place with a number of local communities in rural villages, and that will have, all of them will have AC overnight charging, and a selection of them, where they're capable, will host DC charging for short dwell. This is something that has proven a bit difficult to sell with the funders so far. They very much want the biggest bang for the buck, and are framing everything from an urban perspective. But if we just deliver the urban residents of Wiltshire, I think we'll have failed. So we're making sure that this rural lot can widen the distribution of EV charging. Something else that's come available over the last few years are new products that allow for safe on-street home charging. So instead of trailing a cable across the footway, a cable channel is embedded into the footway surface, and that traps the cable in place, and that offers a more safe access to on-street charging. So certain residents can access charging from their home tariff at a much cheaper rate. We've done a lot of soft market testing around this, and identified a Curvo Charge product as the preferable one. We've done highways officer engagement to bottom out a lot of the issues that they've seen around this product. And we've got a way forward through a trial, retaining council control, using M Group to procure and install. And we've applied recently for a grant for 163k from OZEV to subsidise this. We see the cable trial going in 2 stages. Initial stage of 40 deployed for a year, where we can make assessments of the success, and then use that to inform council operational direction, where we can use the rest of the funding to roll out on a wider scale. And that will be subsidised for the residents, so it would reflect a lower cost than if they went to private market to put it in place. Just some last words on community engagement. I'm trying to make sure that we are data-led but also community-informed. So we have put in place an EV demand tracker on our website, and that allows any resident to place a pin where they think public charging should be, so they can suggest a location. And that is being collected and will be utilised in site selection and be made accessible to the CPO partner in the future. We've had a survey with parish and town councils around issues prior to the site selection process. We've been involved in a lot of market engagement with the market to understand what they see as red flags for a contract such as this, and also what could be best practice, and also around the issues with the rural lot. Yeah, and finally, something that we're undertaking at the moment is bringing together a community engagement programme, where we're going to be talking to high-level stakeholders, so parish councillors and councillors, for the areas that we have identified, so that we can start to build up a level of knowledge and support, but also have ground-level community information involved that we might not be aware of. And that's particularly important for the rural locations. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex. I think we're going to get a lot of questions on this, so I'd like to ask if we could just go, when we ask questions, just have one major question and a supplementary, and then we'll come back to people for second bite. I'd like to get involved some of the other members that haven't commented yet as well. So if you want to put your hands up, I got it right. Okay, Councillor Asplin, Councillor Munns, and then Holder and Carbin. Wakeman. Munns, Holder, Carbin, Wakeman. Did I miss anybody? Kluwer. And Henny. Right, there we go. So kick off with Councillor Asplin then, with your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I did give a brief read to this document last night, but I didn't get very far into it before I found something that I thought wasn't quite right. Paragraph 6 in the background, it states the transition from fossil-fueled internal combustion engine vehicles to electric-powered vehicles has been legislated through the zero-emission mandate, which will stop the sale of new ICE vehicles by 2030. That's not actually the case, because as of the start of this year, they changed the legislation so that hybrid engines and van engines will continue to be sold till 2035. So this is already out of date. And my actual question is, down in Salisbury, which is my nearest big city, in the main car park there used to be about a dozen public charging places. Every single one of those has now been taken over by Wiltshire Council. So they've got the whole lot. So as a council, I'm not sure how we're encouraging people in the public to get to go electric if we're stealing all the power points.
Yeah, good observation with the comment on 2030. I think 2030 ICE-only vehicles will be restricted on sale. And then over time, it will be hybrid. I think what we're identifying there is a change in regulations, and that's a factor that CPOs have got to deal with. All these modelling that comes from the DFT also has to reflect the different regulations that are in place. But in general, the movement towards zero emission transport is something that the government is trying to put in place. On the issue of charges in the particular car park that you identify, the Wiltshire Council has been, one of the big successes for Wiltshire Council is the transition of the fleet to being electrified. But the knock-on effect from that is that everywhere these vans are operating and that they park, they need chargers in place. So at the moment, the uptake of electric power with the fleet at council is about 50%, but for public, it's 5%. And that's why you'll see a lot more fleet chargers than we see public chargers at the moment. But that in effect is why the Levi funding is in place and what it is trying to solve, so that the public chargers will be there once the uptake starts to catch up with the level that the council has at the moment.
I was just going to add to what Alex said, acknowledge actually 2030 is incorrect, particularly when we started this, it was 2030. We've now moved to 2035. But I think, as Alex is describing, that the intent there is the same. Yeah, that 5 year shift, I think there's been that acknowledgement of overshooting in terms of carbon targets, and the 2035 is now with us. But there is still that intent that the infrastructure needs to catch up. So this programme will help incentivise that infrastructure. If I come on to car parks, I think car parks are a separate issue, so they're away from this contract because we're quite conscious actually to the suppliers of EV infrastructure. Car parking spaces are actually quite attractive. You know, it's a captured audience, and that's something that is coming. So provision of EV supply at car parks, a separate programme is coming forward, but not associated with this, because this is very much a concession contract. It's about pump priming a market in an area that's not as attractive to the commercial supplier. So government have recognised that, and that's what this one is all about. So it's a slightly different entity than a standard commercial supplier that you'll see at I don't know, motorway service station. You will see many, many, and they are driven by that commercial entity because that market's easy to tap into, as is provision in a car park. Providing on street within some of our communities and within our rural areas isn't so attractive, but that's why what the team have done is then to target this funding to serve that broader community within Wiltshire.
Thank you. I think that's a fairly clear answer. We'll move on. Councillor Munns.
Thank you, Chair. Really pleased to see cable channels reaching trial stage. I started pushing for that 18 months ago when the environment team and I were at a conference in Birmingham and saw a Kerbo, specifically a Kerbo trade stand. It makes perfect sense to me that we allow home charging for people that don't have off-road car parking availability. So that's good to see. Question on the EV infrastructure in public car parks. I think we can all acknowledge that it's not a charitable organisation here. As you rightly said, a car park offers a captive audience to a company, and a growing percentage of that audience will be needing to plug their car in. So I was interested in one of your slides where you mentioned the capped margin for those operators, and I wondered what that is as a percentage, but also how it works. Are you looking to evidence that at the beginning of a contract? Do you revisit it during the contract to ensure that those margins stay under that cap?
So within the contract, we have, for the AC charging, we have a margin cap of 30 pence. So that is the maximum amount that they can add onto their base energy costs to make the tariff. Now, if they had an energy tariff the same as the council has, that 30 pence would give the average tariff cost across the UK that we have now. But we're pretty confident that the CPOs will have access to better energy deals. So that will lower it below the average we have now. And that also within the bids, they're going to realise that that's one of the main areas they're going to be assessed against. So if they can evidence that they will be setting an affordable tariff, if that tariff will change over time, so we'll have a cheaper night rate that will reflect maybe the cheaper cost of the energy, but also when most residents want to use them. That's the kind of thing that we want to be in the bids. We want the CPO to provide. Over the lifetime of the project, we will have at least annual reviews of the tariff, and part of that will be checking if they've overcharged, and if they have income that's over the margin cap, then we will ask the council to be reimbursed with that income. So there will be controls in place, and there will be ways for both parties to influence this margin cap, because 15 years is a long time for an emerging sector like this. So we've got to have the ability to adapt to innovation that takes place there. Thanks.
Thank you. That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Very good answer. Councillor Holder.
Chair, I have to say, it's really encouraging to see these PowerPoint presentation that we've been given. So this is a point rather than a question, but I do have a question. I think it would have been really helpful if we'd have actually been sent copies of these slides ahead of the meeting. And this is the second presentation we've had today where the officers have put slides up, which have been really useful, which we haven't seen. So is there something we can do to make sure that if we're being sent out papers, albeit quite late, as we got sent out the public questions last night, we're getting copies of slides so we can at least have a look at them that allows us to read them in detail and possibly provoke additional questions. I don't know if that's feasible. I find I'm a bit kind of, caught on the hop here because I've read the report and now I've been given a load of slides to look at and I'm trying to read both at the same time.
My view on that would be that the slides would tend to be a summary of what we've already got, but if they could be provided beforehand, it would be helpful. So we will request that. But I mean, I don't think we can insist on that because officers may be trying to sort of prepare something beyond the report which they've, had to provide. So Dave, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, it's an apology really in the fact that we tended to use slides, particularly today, as a bit of an aide-memoire for ourselves, which we then, if I'm honest, we put together a little bit on the hoof. But, if it's possible, then certainly there's no reason why we couldn't try and provide them in advance. But, it's not to try and catch you out. We're literally using it as a summary of the papers that we put in.
Well, if not possible, if not beforehand, possibly afterwards, if they can be.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think most officers will share the slides afterwards, but we will ask, to your point, we will ask if they have got slides beforehand, if they could share them, in the future.
Thank you. So I have two questions, if I may, and they will be brief. The first one is to do with the cable channel. You said that you've had conversations with M Group about providing the cable channel across the pavements and public highway. What happens about providing the channel to the house if the house doesn't actually immediately abut the public highway? Whose responsibility is it to do that, or is there none?
The cable channel has been put in place to mitigate the risks to the public on the public highway, the footway. Once the charging cable gets onto the private property, then that is the emphasis is on the homeowner to adopt good practice and not set themselves up with anything. Usually, the cable channel is installed to one side of the footway, which allows the charging cable to run across the curtilage of the building or the garden in an area that isn't used for transit. So it's not a problem that's come up with cable channel use yet.
Okay. So if the resident wanted the cable channel to run from their property and then onto the pavement, would they be able to do that in agreement with M Group, or would they have to do it themselves separately?
That's why this is a trial, because there are many of these questions we don't have definitive answers to. And I think we would sit here and be quite sympathetic to a homeowner that goes, well, how am I going to get it across to my car? Whereas our focus is on that safety of the highway. Maybe there is an extension, but I think we'll flush that out as we go through the trial. If you've got your own drive, you're going to pay for your piece of kit that's going to hang on your wall next to your car. So there is an element where the homeowner's got to make that contribution to get their cable to a certain point. But I think that one of the reasons we don't want to jump in immediately with a scheme, because I think there will be a lot of nuances to this. And I think we have to ask ourselves as we go through the trial, are there areas as an authority that we can help homeowners deliver this? It might mean an additional cost or mean additional bit of work, and we have to enter in a slightly different agreement. But that might be a possibility about, how can we serve the residents, or we just do the cable channel and turn our back. And I think that's the principle of this trial, is we're aware that there's so many different questions.
I do have another really detailed question. You might say it's completely inappropriate to answer at this stage, but I was interested to hear that in the urban areas, the majority of the Levi provision is going to be overnight charging. I think that's what you said, whereas in the rural areas there's an element of overnight and rapid charging. How do you prevent, and detailed question I appreciate, how do you prevent a situation where you've got three householders all fighting for the same overnight charging in the same street? Or is that just an impossible question to answer?
Scale of deployment. So in each of these areas, chargers will be deployed at scale. They'll either be bollard chargers that come in sort of deployments of maybe 4 devices, 8 bays by street, or they might be lamppost-based chargers, which are distributed more widely based on where the lampposts are at the moment. I think one of the misconceptions about EV ownership and the need to charge is that everybody thinks every night you've got to plug the vehicle in. But taking the average range of EVs available now, the average miles done by drivers, usually people only need to charge once or twice a week. So I think this kind of, if you look at it that way, it limits the amount of competition that the chargers would have. Yeah, and so scale and the social practice, I think, will cater for that.
If I just come in there, Chair, I mean, Alex is absolutely right about scale. I mean, I go to South London quite a lot because I've got a couple of kids that live down there, and I have an EV, and I sometimes drive down there, and I've got an app that tells me where all the sort of local chargers are. And in parts of South London, you look on the app how many chargers are around you within sort of like a 3 or 4 minute walk. And the last time I looked, there was like 35. So, you know, it's once you've got the scale, you get the choice. You don't get these clashes of requirements.
Thank you. Councillor Carbin.
Thanks. Yeah, can I just endorse that point about the slides? So I did find those slides particularly useful, just to envisage what it looks like. When I was thinking of the cross pavement thing as being a cut and cover job, but it's not. It's just a little channel that goes across the pavement. So, and seeing that on the picture makes things much more comprehensible, and that applies to the whole thing. I think, although you did have a very nice pavement there, I don't know where you got that one from.
That was Milton Keynes.
Sorry? Non-lead?
Milton Keynes.
Milton Keynes, yeah, I thought it wouldn't be Wiltshire. So my question was going to be about the village hall. So I'm looking at page 95, and we've got this league table here. And one of my villages is at the top of the league, and one of my villages is at the bottom of the league. Although I think the Atworth one is because you haven't credited them with any parking spaces on the village hall. Or in fact, they do have some parking spaces, which hasn't been allowed for. But really, I don't understand why it's in the interests of a village hall to get involved in this very complicated bureaucratic contract. Why can't they just put a thing up, a plug up, and invite their residents to come and plug themselves into it, much in the same way as you would do for a domestic charger? So what's in it for the villages to get involved with all this, I guess, is one question. I think I take your point about the 15-year being very difficult because the market's changing so fast, isn't it? You can see it. It's developing out there. The number of vehicles is almost visibly increasing, and the number of commercial charging points, as we've heard, is increasing. And I think it's a bit like broadband, isn't it? We have our project to look at the hard-to-reach areas, but then the number of hard-to-reach areas decreases as the commerciality changes. So I think in 15 years, the market is going to be incredibly different from what it is now. And that's why I'm a bit scared of the complexity of this contract. I mean, yeah, I understand the pavement side of it, the car park side of it, but getting into the detail of what is a developing market, it's the kind of thing that local authorities can get very badly wrong. And I'd be very concerned about how this is going to develop over the next 15 years or so. But say my specific question was the village halls. How's it going to work for them?
The methodologies that were included in the appendices, to an extent, the rural one is a work in progress. We had to use some sort of geographical location point to calculate from with the with GIS, Geographical Information Services, and most of these areas had a village hall, and hypothetically that could be an off-street location that could host a hub. So we chose to use those to then base the assessment of how many residents we're going to catch within a 5-minute walking distance to leave the car overnight, but also a 10-minute drive to offer them a short 12 charging for residents in the catchment area. What we have since identified is that we're not going to have a hub in every village. We're going to have to integrate off-street charging with some on-street. No, sorry, I'm getting that wrong already. We're going to have on-street charging, but also some off-street charging to host the DC chargers where they're applicable. And that is one of the things we want to get out of the community engagement that we're organising with the area board partnership managers at the moment, so that we can talk to the communities and find out, is the village hall applicable? Are they interested? Are there other off-street sites that we might not know of that they know may be interested? And all that has to be collected and put in place as part of the contract in order for the CPO to be able to look at that and not see it as high risk and potentially commercially unattractive. We did our initial, we did our official market engagement launch. We had 40 attendees from the industry. We had 12 organisational one-to-one meetings after that. And one of the, first of all, we got positives back saying we're really happy that you've listened to the market. You've got rid of a lot of the red flags we're seeing with Levi contracts across the UK. But one of the criticisms was that they thought the rural lot as presented was too risky and was uncommercial. It wasn't commercialised. So we're going back to that list. We're going back to the communities to further develop and put more information on there and be more specific. So yeah, the village halls within that site selection methodology were a proxy in a way to calculate, the impact of putting something in that village. But whether it is the village hall we're working with will be something that we need to develop with the community. From the point of view of what's in it for the village, I think what this Levi funding allows is for the mass deployment of EV charging, but for the council to have some influence over where it goes. If we leave it up to the market, it'll all be in dense urban areas. That's where it makes commercial sense. But we need to make sure that it covers some of the deprived urban areas, but especially the rural areas that don't normally see their needs met because the CPOs are chasing the most commercial area. So the inclusion of this is because we have the Levi grant funding, and because we're putting that money in, we get to stipulate some of the places that we want things to go.
Thanks very much. That's very reassuring. And good luck with it.
I'm just going to come back very quickly in terms of completely take your point. 15 years is an awfully long time. It's one of the reasons we're putting the various protection measures in that contract so that we're not taking on a liability at Wiltshire Council. But we're also conscious it's, the landscape is changing. The technology over 15 years is going to change dramatically as well. But this is all about being that pump priming the industry to come and start getting infrastructure in. We know that infrastructure is going to rapidly change. In 5 years' time, it'll probably be different. What we're trying to do is to make sure that the contract allows that to come forward, that it doesn't get stuck and says, right, trickle charging, that's the only way. So we've got some ability in that contract to allow the CPO to install that infrastructure, and hopefully this will be the catalyst for them to do it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think the swappability of the technology is key as well. So some charges are more difficult to swap than others with the updates, aren't they? So, thank you. I've got Councillor Wakeman next.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 brief questions, if I may. Largely answered thus far. The presentation was very useful, especially you answered lots of the questions that I had here. The first one is around the sort of phases of actually deploying. Do you have any plans to do some of your initial deployments into some of the more targeted areas, get some feedback as to whether the chargers themselves actually get used at all, before you mass roll out to these locations, with the potential of having installed a load of chargers in places where there's actually not ever going to be any demand?
Good question. We're going to be working with commercial partners, and we've got to acknowledge that they've got more knowledge about charger deployment and what works and where the utilisation is than we do. And that's partly why we've chosen to identify larger target areas. Some councils have gone down to the street, to the actual location, and suffered in receiving bids because they're too prescriptive. So we've given larger indicative areas identified using the lower super output area. And that will allow the CPO to then refine the positioning of the chargers within those. And I think that'll go some way to address the issue you're talking about. Because we're working with the CPO and their commercial entity, they kind of live or die on the utilisation of their charge points. So it's having their involvement, which I think gives us the confidence that we're going to have utilised chargers. On top of that, we are asking for sites to be done which would normally be viewed as not commercially attractive. And those are the ones that are framed as kind of urban social focus. So there'll be a ratio of, I think it will match the kind of funding ratio as well. So if they do 2 commercial focus sites, then we would need them to do 1 social site as well. So that they're not just doing the commercials, and the ones that might not see the utilisation straight away is being balanced against them creating some income for themselves. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a reasonable response. Tying in the commerciality into it sort of de-risks it, I guess, and gives us that feedback will happen. That's good. The second question is regarding the cross-pavement charging. There's a statement in the report that says about not implying a reserved parking space. I wonder if there's been any consideration to that sort of operational front-end aspect of these through path charging strips. I think although it doesn't imply a reserved parking space, I can already feel the emails coming in from residents that are arguing over, now I've got a strip in, I need to be able to park my car there. Equally, if I've got 2 residents that are next to each other, but there's only one space to put 1 strip in, is it just the person is it assumed that the first person to put in the request is going to get that, and that's going to be tied into their home? Finally, I know we don't want to clog up the planning system with these kinds of activities, and I believe that we're looking to try and end up with this as a permissive development. I'm worried that we end up with a permissive development that actually ends up in quite a lot of disputes, when actually for the 20 requests, I believe it was, that have been put in across Wiltshire, it would just be easier to do planning on this.
Start on this one. There has been quite a few trials conducted by other councils with cable channels, and we've made sure that we get sight as many of the results of those as possible. The issue of access to the space is always the one that comes up, and invariably has been found to be less of an issue than expected. Even though some trials in Oxford were, were describing a sort of community response to this, where they had a WhatsApp group where they could kind of negotiate access to the spaces. Equally, we can all recognise areas where that would not happen, and somebody might end up parking there just to be spiteful. The cable channel, we can't give that area to that householder because it is the public highway, So everyone has access to it in the way that you can't have parking outside your house. I think we will have a user agreement which will set out what we expect the user to do in employing these cable channels, and it will be right at the top in capital letters. You do not have the right to park in front of this cable channel all the time. It's not your own space. But there will be a lot of other things in there about how we expect them to operate the cable channel. To an extent, it will be first come, first served. Where the demand is, we will try and respond to that. But I think there's a lot of operational deployment criteria that we're having to identify. So if there's restricted parking in front of that house, it won't be applicable. If they have zero curtilage to the front of their house, which means the charger would be sticking out from the front of the house, the cable would be spitting out onto the footway, then that would also, be too difficult for us to install at the moment. So yeah, there are not all the people who request one will be able to get one. It won't be suitable for everybody, but to an extent, it will be first come, first served. However, Turbocharge are offering facilities where the cable channel could be used for community charging. So you could open that up so that your neighbours could use it, and there would be arrangements for them to pay you back for the energy they use. It doesn't get past the parking access issue, but it's a way of ensuring that the streets aren't littered with these cable channels. Yeah, I hope that answers some of your questions.
You happy with that, Councillor Whitman?
I think that in some way largely confirms my concern, but I do understand, yes, there will need to be an amount of residents working together on this. I still come back to, just in general, whether this may be better served through a planning process. Just looking at the and with that, is there an opportunity with the 20 requests that have already come in to pilot this question and look at how many of those 20 would be suitable and what additional discussions would need to be had at each of those sites with the other residents?
We've got 40 plus requests in now by residents who didn't really know there was a trial going on. They'd seen cable channels and thought, oh, that sounds like an idea I want. As things stand at the moment, the cable channel won't need planning permission because the install of that's being conducted by the council. However, the associated home charger won't have permitted development rights. So as things stand at the moment, it's the home charger install will need planning permission. It's an extra layer of admin and cost. But the good news is that very recently, DFT announced that they're doing they're looking at extending the permitted development rights so that it includes cable channels. So hopefully in the near future, that barrier to access will be removed. Thanks.
If I just add to what Alex is saying, I think that what the Planning Act is, so that you don't need to have planning permission for your home charger because you just don't have a driveway, which is where there's a hole in the Planning Act. I think this highlights one of the reasons why it is a trial, because we are aware of these issues. We're aware that a resident's going to have an expectation when they get a cable channel in that the space outside their house is theirs. These schemes work really well, particularly where you've got residents parking, where that sort of mentality is already there. We're conscious where that doesn't exist. We're going to need to work with, potentially need to work with the communities and actually understand that. But we will need to make sure that whoever asks for a cable channel, we don't set an expectation, that they are aware of the risks, that they may not be able to use it. Somebody might be parked there. We can't take on that responsibility because we don't want to be inundated with those phone calls. So we need to flush these things out as we go through the trial on what's the best approach and the best way to deal with it, because there is clearly a demand for cable channels. So we don't want to refuse that. But we need to make sure that we manage it and introduce measures that it's as effective as possible.
Thank you. I'm very conscious of time, so if we can keep our questions and answers concise. Councillor Kluwer.
Thank you very much. Along with concerns about national electricity prices just generally seem to be going inexorably up, I have some concerns about the lifespan of these projects. It's very exciting at the beginning to get going and bring a new thing, but what I would like to know is what provision is there for either the replacement or removal of off-street chargers, for example, in say 25, 30, 40 years time, when technology has changed and perhaps we're not using electricity, maybe we've gone to synthetic or hydrogen or some other format. So I'd like to know, has that been thought of, and who is paying for it if it has been thought of? And because of course the cable channels themselves, I imagine that the footway would need to be restored. So it's that aspect as well as the actual machinery for the away from home charging as well in the rural areas. So that's my first concern. How do we tidy up afterwards? And also in terms of the street scene, some of these gadgets can look quite, they're okay at a motorway service station if they're white or yellow or whatever. That's fine because they're in a defined, but if you're talking about rural areas, are we actually looking at the visual appearance of these things, and will we have any choice? Because we don't want them to be any more than showing where they are, but not ugly. So those were my questions. And also I shall talk to Ellen about the graphic on page 111 because the text isn't visible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, I think actually dismantling and disposal is something that we need to think about during the lifespan of the contract. So these contracts are only for that 15-year period. So I think we can be pretty certain over 15 years that if that technology change or step change is going to come, we'll see it during that 15 years, but the 15 years will still be relevant, certainly with what car manufacturers are doing at the moment in the fact that they are throwing weight into EVs and with the 2035 requirement from government. So unless those things suddenly disappear, we are in EV world. I think in terms of if there is a need to then take that equipment away, these contracts will generate some income for the authority, and we'll need to look at maybe putting aside income to actually then dispose of equipment should that be necessary. But the hope is that if EV is here to stay, that company, the concession contract, is let to an organisation that will effectively update that equipment. They are there to maintain, are responsible for the operation of it. They'll hopefully keep that up to date with the latest technology, and that will evolve over time. And I know Alex is dying to talk about how that they fit in conservation areas.
I'll just add to the disposal of units issue. With the Levi contract, it will be part of the contract that at the end of the contract, the operator must offer the council if they want to keep the unit. And if we don't, then they have to dispose of them and make good the road area. So that's one way of dealing with that issue. Over the lifespan of that product, we've been told by the CPOs we should expect at least one replacement. The lifespan is usually about 7 years. So in that way, they will be getting updated. We've also, I touched on the issue of having various technologies available. So one of the technologies is we're asking for is a flat and flush technology, which is particularly suited to conservation areas, because that, when it's not in operation, then that unit is then hidden. It's either held subterranean, or in operation you add something else to it, and so the visual impact is only limited to when it is in use. We'll also have within the operation of the contract, when the installer is proposing a location, it'll go through review with council officers, and where we identify that it's going to be a sensitive area, then we'll make sure that the conservation officers have input to make sure that we're not putting anything in that's too out of character for the area or has too much impact. I think the cable channels, the expectation is that even if someone moves house, then that utilisation will be valued in the future, and they'll want to retain it in place. There will be charges for that installation, which will generate some income for the council, and then I think we need to retain some of that, with the anticipation that there will be times when the channel has to come out and we have to make good on the footway. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that's at Wiltshire Council's cost, is it, or is it within the contract? And thank you for the reassurance on conservation areas. That's good.
Because we're installing the cable channels within council control, then it will be at the council's cost. But the charges that we set up around the cable channels should be able to generate enough income to cover those as a maintenance cost. We can either roll it into the initial charge or have an ongoing small annual fee that we can then pool to cover lifetime maintenance costs. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those questions. We'll move on to Councillor Henning, and then I've got a comment and a couple of questions, and I think then we need to move on after that. So, Councillor Henning.
Thank you, Chair. I won't say I'll be brief because I might waffle on for ages. It'd be great if we had induction charging, wouldn't it? You just park your car and it just, yeah, that might come. First off, it's really great to see this paper coming to this. I think it's the only, my second Environment Select, and this is something especially the channel charging, which, and it's funny reading the report because there is Chippenham and Loudon right up there in second or third position, obviously because we've got so many dwellings without off-street parking. And I think of a gentleman in Loudon that I think he's been on at me for 4 or 5 years. And you probably know who I mean. You raised a very good point. I have actually broken up fights in Downing Street in Chippenham because there's people, I want to park in front of my house. You're parking in front of my house. Why are you? I had to get. I actually held people apart a long time ago, and that it could be a problem. Also, it brings into the whole thing about residents parking as well, which is another nightmare scenario. But I think problems will be overcome as it unfolds. Looking at it, when a pavement channel is put in, I see there's a cost in there of £1,000. Is that correct? I think that's going to put a lot of people. Let that question sit for a moment. I did see somewhere where is there a grant for residents to help them out on this? How you said there's a try. Nice to see the one in Melksham, and I hope it's all gone in and it's been fine and there's been no problems, and that's probably where we've got to where we are. How for the trial, do you want people to apply, or have you already got enough people that have been asking and you've gone back to them and more or less said, well, we're going to do a trial, do you want to do it? to that? And when would a trial start? The other thing was, it's great to see the area, you come into the area boards to use the area boards as a vehicle to help push this. So the question was the cost to residents, how residents apply and when the trial starts, basically.
We've got we've had residents contacting us continuously, questioning cable channels, and when they've done that, we've said, would you be interested in taking part in a trial? We're hoping to do one. So we have kind of a preferential list of residents that we're going to offer, to trial participation to first. We do think there's going to be over a 50% kind of attrition rate. So we know we're going to have to open this up for public requests for participation. So yeah, we intend to be doing that. We think, given we need, based on when we might get the grant funding, based on how long it's going to take to set up with M Group, we think we might be able to get the trial, putting things in place from April. But there's a lot of new areas we've got to cross to get there. But that's a rough timescale. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, no, I recognise it's it seems like a very simple thing. Just put a little channel across, and I'm glad to see that the Kerbo is only a small channel, whereas the other one sounded like it was you had to get a JCB in to dig the channel. Yeah, good. Thank you.
I'm just going to come in on terms of cost. So you're quite right, but what we have been doing is we've been looking at what else is done elsewhere. So we haven't done a bottom-up costing yet. We still need to work through that. And that's something we're going to do with M Groups. We need to understand their costs. We need to understand the cost of the channel itself, how much to take it away at the end and make good. So we'll do a bottom-up costing, but we have been looking at what is done with other local authorities. And that seems to be the benchmark cost that's being offered out there at the moment. So that's where that number has come from. And to be fair, that's what, as a team, the team have been doing that a lot, is let's look at what other authorities, what some of the London boroughs, particularly in London, there's so much more advanced than where anybody else is. So we've made sure that we're looking at what's fair and reasonable. And I think, we do want to go forward and pitch it about the right level. There's a question mark whether the funding we've had from government, should we use that in the trial to certainly supplement the cost, because we're using that trial for our own purposes, if you like, to make sure that we're refining the future scheme. So there's a few question marks over how much it should be at the moment, but £1,000, that's that sort of benchmark number that other people are charging at the moment.
Yeah, given the ranking of Loudon and Rowden and Chippenham, I'll hopefully be speaking to you quite a lot in the future. Thank you.
Just wanted to add on the cost.
Yeah.
1,000 is a market average. If we subsidise it at all with the grant funding, then we'll be able to pitch that cost a lot lower to the trial participants.
Thank you, Councillor Henning. Thank you all for all those questions. I think it's been a really valuable piece of scrutiny on an increasingly important area. And what's very clear from the discussion is that it's challenging and complicated, and it's part of a major transition which also involves the grid, charge point operators, vehicle manufacturers, residents and others besides, with huge implications for what's required in the next 5 years. So I don't underestimate the size of the challenge that you guys are involved in. Thank you for your answers and your honesty about the challenges. I hope the committee can support you going forward and you'll come back and tell us about progress. I've got 3 sort of final questions in areas that haven't been picked up, and I'll fire them straight off so you can have a think about them. Will the council, if it hasn't already, move to contactless credit card payments for the charges it's putting in to overcome the issues with proprietary apps and the things that put people off about apps not working and not getting charges quickly? And if we aren't, can we please? Have officers considered using EV charge point facilities with other public sector organisations so that we can, we've got more options for our own vehicles and we can release some of those charges in car parks for public use? which I know some other councils have done. And finally, and this is a big one, we haven't got time to go into it, but how are we engaging with businesses? Because most people who charge, do it at home and they do it at work, and that cuts out a lot of the need for other things. But businesses aren't always putting them in. So how are we engaging on that? Thank you.
Responding about the contactless question, because we've pitched, because we're asking for most of these to be 7 kilowatt AC chargers, they don't legally have to have contactless payment. If they were to involve contactless, then that would cost more to install and we will get less charges in place. I think generally contactless on rapid chargers that are on the strategic road network, they definitely need them in place there so you can be really quick in your charging. I think if these chargers are being used primarily by residents and usually by the same residents continuously, then the requirement to install an app and access payment via that, you probably have to set it up once, but then you'll be using the same app continuously onwards. And that makes the demand for contactless, I think, less urgent. We're within the Levi contract. We're not asking for it on the majority of charges because it's an extra cost that will reduce the number of charges we can put out. And I think it's a utility that's best put in place on charges that we won't generally be putting in. Fleet sharing, I know Fleet have tried sharing their fleet charging with members of the public, and that didn't go so well when the fleet vehicles needed to access those charging places, and the members of the public were still parked on them, and that's kind of scuppered things.
Sorry, just to clarify, I was asking about sharing public organisations like the NHS, the police, Wiltshire Council, sharing not with the public, with each other. To release more of the charges from the individual organisations.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, and I think there needs to be more of it. At the moment, we're the council have accessed Zebra funding, zero emission bus, something else in the acronym, and that's paying for the Salisbury Reds to convert their fleet over to electric. And I know that we've been talking with their depot managers about opening that depot up so that other commercial vehicles can use it when all the buses are out. I think that's a really good use case that we've identified and that we're moving forward on, but we can always do more on that, I think. Thank you.
And the final question was on businesses.
I don't have a very good response for that. It's a really good question. I think it's something we've not engaged with a lot of the other businesses and promoted this. I think that we've left the central government to offer their grants. They do have business charging grants available, but it's not something that we've focused on yet.
I was just going to add to that. I think, with businesses, obviously businesses are going to deliver EV charging through planning processes as new businesses, but there's a huge opportunity. And I think that what you're identifying is that opportunity. I think we've been a bit head down in trying to make sure that we're delivering this bit. And we've been working with people like Salisbury Reds, and then that sparks that conversation about that's an opportunity. We need to keep having those conversations, particularly with those key partners, with police and NHS, and then with key businesses within Wiltshire as well. So I think this is a topic and a discussion point that is forever going to grow. And I think with our positioning with the concession contracts that we're doing, we are part of that conversation and a key player in that. So I think, this isn't the end of the story. There's much more to be told yet.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I think I'm going to wrap this one up. We have some draft proposals. They are that the Select Committee notes the contents of the report on the delivery of public residential electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and that we request an update report in 12 months' time. But just to actually add to that, I think, Simon, if there are significant things happening in the interim, we'd welcome you coming back and telling us about those as well. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah, thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to the Cabinet Member updates. So we have a standing item on Select Committee agenda that the Cabinet Member will update us. In this item, we'll receive a no longer than 5 minutes verbal update from the attending member or portfolio holder, highlighting key pieces of news in their area that are not covered elsewhere in the agenda. And we welcome Councillor Martin Smith to give us an update on his area. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, hopefully I won't be 5 minutes. But yeah, one of the things I wanted to mention was that as part of my responsibilities, I'm on the board of the Western Gateway Subnational Transport Group, which is, those members that don't know, it's a sort of a regional body constituted of councils like ourselves and our neighbours, and also involvement from people from WECA. So it looks at sort of the strategic public transport issues for the region as a whole, and that's it gets most of its funding from government, although the councils do contribute as well. But unfortunately, the government has announced that that funding is going to be cut in the medium term, and so we had a discussion about what that means for the board. There's a lot of enthusiasm for those links to continue in some shape or form, because it makes absolutely perfect sense for us to be continually talking to our neighbours about transport links that obviously crisscross the whole wider area. So we're looking at how that can best be done, and probably I think one of the aspects that we're looking at is going back to government and saying, can you help us at least until we get to the point where we've got the devolution, or so-called devolution, in this area, where we've got a mayoral combined authority, which will obviously take up a lot of the transport responsibilities for the area. But even when we have that, there was a feeling that we still needed a wider group, because the proposals for Wiltshire is that we go in with Dorset, Somerset, and Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole. But obviously, we have links to Baines, Gloucestershire, Swindon, etc. So just to alert you that those discussions are continuing at the moment. That board is continuing, but obviously there's some doubt as to its future. The only other thing I really wanted to talk about was that just last month I had a walk around the city of Salisbury with the business group, the Salisbury Bid, just to look at various projects that they want to work with us on. It would be funded from the Salisbury SIL and S106 monies. So a number of those projects will be feeding through into the system over the coming months. So just to alert people that we are actively engaged with that group. I think that's probably all I need to mention at the moment.
Thank you very much, Martin. Questions, Councillor Holder?
Sorry, Chair, my comment isn't for Councillor Smith. So if there are people who've got questions, I do have a point of order I wish to raise, actually.
If it's a point of order, raise it now, by all means.
Okay. At the last full council meeting, when item 8 was raised at the full council meeting, which was the climate emergency papers, I asked a specific question of Councillor Sample relating to a matter on page 118 of the full council agenda, point 18, referring in appendix 2 to the issue relating to scope 3 emissions. And I specifically asked him if he would, and he said yes, whether he would come back either to present at today's meeting a further detail in terms of what the council is doing to count and measure and monitor and report on scope 3 emissions, or to send a written answer to this meeting. It's disappointing to note that neither of those two things have happened. And I wonder if we could actually probably write to Councillor Sample and ask him when that response is going to come. It specifically confirmed it was going to come to this meeting today.
Thank you for that. I mean, I will say that I was off on leave for 2 weeks after the full council meeting, and so it is possible that a sort of reminder of the actions that had been agreed sort of during the discussion and debate hadn't been provided. That's not to say that they couldn't have provided anyway, but what I can do is I will follow up with Councillor Sample and the team around specifically what you requested and what was promised in terms of an update, and Sam can also come in about providing some information.
Thank you. Just to confirm, Councillor Sample was hoping to be here today, but he has sent his apologies. So absolutely with Kieran, we will pick that up in terms of full written answer and response from Councillor Sample.
Is that okay? Great, thank you for raising that. Questions for Councillor Smith, Councillor Wayman?
Yes, just very quickly, sorry, Martin, just to ask you about Western Gateway STB. When does the funding end? Is it the end of this? So they're not the end of this financial year. That's it, is it?
It's basically through funding we've got through to end of next year, next financial year, at the moment.
If there are no further questions, then I'll thank you very much, Councillor Smith. We will move on to the item 10, the final item, which is the Select Committee's forward work plan, which has been attached to your agenda packs, pages 143 to 148. I think we've included, previous suggestions to add things to that, and we're constantly updating it. And I know the officers are working hard to try and keep up with the changes to the Cabinet's forward work plan to make sure we get things in the right order, and we'll continue to do that. But are there any specific things people wanted to raise about the forward work plan? No. Thank you. Fantastic. Takes on to item 11, which is urgent items. I'm not aware of any urgent items. So I'll just say thank you again to members. Some really good questions, and thank you to officers for their reports. I know there's a lot of hard work goes into those, and thank you very much for your excellent answers as well. I think we've got some really good, honest answers in this meeting, so thank you for that. Date of the next meeting is 13th of January 2026. So I can now close the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right.
It's good timing. My laptop's about to die.
Right.
Probably time for a change. It only lasts like 2 hours now.